Richie McNeill from Beatport, SFX, formerly Stereosonic, and Sharam, formerly one half, or still one half of Deep Dish, and a DJ of his own right, producer, and very outspoken and interesting guy to talk to. So come and join us on the stage here. I think these two have got their own plan of how this is going to work, but just here. Yeah, no, the other way. Yeah. There you go, stay there. Okay, so we asked the delegates for some questions for these two. This is a bit of an open format where we kind of throw any question at these two and see what they've got to say about the key issues of the day. If we get stuck for questions, I think they want to talk about Star Wars for most of the discussion. But feel free at any point to put your hands up with questions. We got a few that came in overnight from Valerie. If you want to give me some of these.
Actually, I had a question for Charles.
Go on.
That club looks impressive. I want to know if there's a bathroom in the DJ booth.
Charles?
Or close to it. That's a point that not a lot of people talk about, but it's very important for the DJs.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a few questions that I'll read out as they come in, but anybody want to kick this off with a question for either of these two? It can be aimed at them individually, or it can just be something about the scene that you'd like to get their take on it.
What does special operations mean?
I had the same question, actually.
I did too. Go on.
So I left Stereosonic a couple of years ago, March last year, and had a break, had a third child with my partner, and when I came back to work, or while I was away, I had Special Ops as my signature on my iCloud personal email address, and when I was talking to Bob Silliman about coming back to work, he was trying to find a title, and my role was kind of varies. I work for Beatport, working on the consumer platform that they're about to launch properly next year. And I also work for SFX running Asia, and I also report to the board and Bob on a management level, I guess on the direction of the business kind of overall, because Duncan from ID&T left and there's only a few founders left from the initial business. Well, there's quite a few founders. So because of my role as kind of like special, I guess. I do lots of different things. I report to the board. I report to two bosses, a boss of CEO Live, which is Riddy Van Stralen, who used to work at ID&T, and I report to Greg Consiglio, who's the boss of the CEO of Beatport. So as well as kind of working in the system as an employee, I'm also sort of just on the side here reporting to the board on some structural things and the direction moving forward with the company, obviously, which faces lots of challenges. So, special operations, special ops. It's a good title.
Okay. Is there a Ruben Samuel in the room? Okay, you sent us 3 questions. Give us the first one that you asked today. I think the 3 all linked together, but...
I wrote it too late at night, sorry.
You mean you were drunk when you wrote it?
Partially, yeah. Second bottle
Do you
of
want me
wine
to read it for you?
Well, I don't have a copy and I can't remember, so it would help.
Okay. Okay, your first question said, other than financial gain, what's the initiative behind selling promotional space on Beatport? Does this not cause a domino effect on good music ever seeing the charts and thereby not earning the revenue needed to grow, let alone survive?
Selling promotional space on Beatport? You mean for music?
Like banners.
Oh, banners. Well, the consumer platform has cost a lot of money to develop. I think the cost so far is like in the just under 10 million. Someone's got to pay for that. Obviously, artists and labels are still getting paid from the pro side of Beatport. So the theory is with some advertising, localised advertising, so Australian promoters can advertise their events that just turn up to Australian customers that are IP logged. The theory is to try and generate additional revenues, which we share with the content. So on the streaming platform, if someone is listening to Sharam's music and they're looking at a page, whether they're looking at the news and listening to his music, and there is an advertiser on there, say Stereosonic's advertising, it's an Australian customer, and they're being presented with an ad for Stereosonic Festival or for Lost Picnic or whatever event it is, that they get a share of that revenue. So we're looking at ways to try and monetize the industry more. A lot of artists complain with Spotify. They're a very small artist on a massive platform, and they don't get that much money. What we're trying to do is make the dance artists, I guess, a larger share on a smaller platform, but it's focused on a specific core demographic of people. So, it's going to be supported with advertising. It's going to be supported with a subscription service, so people can pay between $4 and $5 US a month, like Spotify, and take the music on their devices, and access to exclusive video streams, access to exclusive DJ mixes and content at festivals. So, for example, if it's an SFX festival, with your membership that you pay every month, you also, if you get to the festival and you've got the Beatport app on your phone, you'll be able to go through the express queue at the front of the festival and get in a lot faster than the normal punters. So we're trying to sort of have a membership kind of benefit system for fans and people who are into electronic music. So I think advertising from third parties is an important part of that. As long as it's not like a toothbrush company or something, and it's something relevant, I think it goes hand in hand.
It's no different to magazines that we've had to deal with for 20, 30 years in music. But your next question says, following up on this, does Beatport have any initiatives in place to level the playing field for a seemingly unweighted charting system?
That's a very good question, and yes, we just had our 2016 strategy meetings a couple of weeks ago, and we're actually looking at developing a new chart that takes weight to the size of the genre. So instead of the chart having 4 or 5 spinning tracks in the top 10, what about an artist that's sold that's had 6,000 downloads in techno, which might not sound a lot, but that is a big seller for that genre, and having some weighting based on the genre's size and market share. So yeah, that is a problem, and obviously having a top 10 is a problem because there's only 10 tracks out of 10,000 a week. So we're thinking of considering having a top 50 and having it genre weighted. So there'll be more techno, there'll be more trance, there'll be more dubstep, there'll be more house, there'll be all the genres represented fairly across a top 50. So it is in the pipeline.
Sounds like a great initiative. Good.
Yeah, hopefully we're trying to make it a fairer, sort of more level system.
Do you want to ask your last question? No? Okay. God, you were really drunk. Okay, do you feel that aggregators are further diluting Beatport's original vision to break new music, seeing as the volume of releases is arguably superseding quality?
Maybe that's a question for him, being an artist.
What's the question again?
You asking me?
Richie, yeah, you give us your answer first.
Look, it's like anything, things become popular and more people, get interested, and more people want to jump on the bandwagon, and you have every man and his dog and brother and cousin and sister wanting to be a DJ now. So there's always going to be more people interested in becoming DJs and producing. I think Beatport is trying to filter out. It's becoming harder now more than ever to just send in demos and say, I want to start a label. They're turning away. 80% of the approaches they get for labels are being turned away because they think the quality's not there. It's hard because you have somebody like Deadmau5 that started in his bedroom, and kind of Beatport was a really integral part of his his rise to fame. And when he was sending demos in, like, I want to start a label and this sort of thing, he was one of those artists that got one sort of pretty easily because he came with 10 tracks and 4 of them were fantastic. You want to sort of nurture new music, and you want to encourage people to develop and to encourage the nurturing of the business, but at the same time you have to be brutal, and you have to be honest and say it's not ready yet. So we do turn a lot of people away. I think the filtering process of allowing new people into the system it's tougher than it's ever been. Because there is a lot of average music out there,
Sharam, have you ever knowingly released average music at the time?
I mean, the whole genre and how music is perceived. I mean, I think we've sort of been through this for the past 20 years. I mean, when I started out, like what is now called deep house used to be called house, and what was called progressive house is now, again, deep house. Some people call it tech house. So it's always morphing. And I think like company like Beatport can do a better job of categorizing for some of the newer generation, like how this stuff is supposed to be categorized. Like a lot of time you go to a progressive chart, for example, it's EDM. It's like from top to bottom is like mostly EDM. Even the house chart is like that. So I think having a just EDM chart, I think would help everything. But at the end of the day, it's about the quality of music. And I might think the track I make is the most, like the baddest record out there, but ultimately consumers are who's gonna, dictate what's good and what's not bad in terms of how the charts are aggregated. And DJs are who play the records mostly on Beatport. So it's like, we can sit there and say, well, I can't believe this chart is this, I can't believe this quality of music is that. But it's people's voice. I mean, those charts are not generated by computer like randomly. It's based on sales, and people are actually buying this stuff. So, if you want to make a change, you got to change within the system. You know what I mean? If you want more of the quote unquote undergrounds to make it, the underground producers need to make records that are a little bit more accessible. Maybe there's so many different ways you can approach it. But I've always been sort of against people sort of lashing out at one entity, for example, now Beatport or a particular DJ or a particular genre, and sort of take their frustrations out. And that happens a lot in our industry. People don't see their records like going up the charts or whatnot, and they lash out against another sort of genre, other DJs from a genre. It's like there's a lot of sort of infighting, which I think is sort of counterproductive. I think we're all part of one community, and I think we need to all embrace one another and respect one another. And no matter what genre of music is being played, whether it's main stage by some of the sort of bigger quote unquote EDM acts or trance acts, or if it's like an underground tent. At the end of the day, our job is to make people happy, whether it's through music, through DJing, putting a festival, putting a club on. I mean, it's a way of life, and I think people should celebrate it.
Okay. What percentage of music that's presented to Beatport do you reject to the platform?
That's a good question. I know more is rejected than accepted. Obviously, if it's a DJ that's really well established and they're starting a label for the first time and they send in a bunch of tracks and they're serious about it, it's a fairly easy road for an established person. But we get a lot of approaches from independents, bedroom DJs and producers and unknowns that we're just like, go and do your thing. The music's not ready yet. Come and see us in 6 months. It's not no. It's just it's come back later when you've sort of worked it a bit more and sort of built up your profile. So it's a lot. I'm pretty sure it's in the high.
Well, here's a question: should it be rejected? I mean, should anything be rejected? I mean, a person who makes the music, that's art, right? Now it's up to the people to decide whether that art is good or not. So I don't think a company like Beatport should have any say in what music goes up or doesn't go up. Let people decide. Why should there be a filtration system? That if somebody's good enough to release a piece of music, let people decide. They might, it might sell 5 units, it might sell 5,000 units. People will ultimately decide what's good. I don't think any, as a label, for example, what we do at Yoshitoshi is, we have, I am, and the people that are at my company, we're the filtration system. So we decide what's good. But I may not like a lot of stuff that's on, the next label. Doesn't mean that stuff shouldn't come out. Those people have a voice too, and ultimately people should decide what music we listen to. It's like the first form of expression. I made this piece of art, and I like to find an audience. Some people find it on YouTube. Some people find it on SoundCloud. Some people find it on Beatport.
So Richie, why do you reject music?
That's a good question. You have to speak to the curation and label team. To be honest, it's not really 100% my department, but I think it's there are vehicles for that, like SoundCloud and other forms of media for people to build their profile and to build their artist's sound and to reach market and create demand. And I think that's what those platforms are for. I think they're the kind of I think that was built, SoundCloud was one of those platforms that was built to serve your music, your creativity, and so anybody can just start a label and start production and start building their own name, and then it gets to a point where you start to establish an audience, and then you can go and actually start a label, because there are statements to be generated. There's a lot of cost in running a distribution company like Beatport. There's 200 staff, and it's in the tens of millions of dollars in cost. So you have to control that, and the more labels you take on and the more stuff you're cataloguing and the more things that you're taking on, it's got to work from an economies of scale point of view as well.
Also, the economy of it, the business side of it will dictate. If a label comes up or a producer comes up that's not putting out quality music per se, if it's not good, people are not going to get attracted to it. So that label is probably going to go bankrupt, or that artist is not going to make music anymore. They're going to do something else. So it's sort of the industry filters itself out, and I think we should just let that continue.
Okay, question for you, Sharam. A random one. Should DJs be given controllers for pyrotechnics?
Should they be given control of what? Pyrotechnics?
Should DJs be given controllers for pyrotechnics?
Well, I mean, why not? I mean, it's entertainment, so I would say yes.
I don't mind. As an ex-promoter, I don't mind if a DJ controls the pyrotechnics, as long as it's safe. I mean, they know the cues better than anybody when they're playing a record, when the thing's going to go bang, and they press the CO2 button. I've seen plenty of DJs press the CO2 button themselves. I think it's great.
The next question is, how do you feel about indoor fireworks? Totally. Anyway, you don't need to answer that. Anybody got a question in here for these guys? Can you tell us your name, where you're from, and your company?
Yeah. So I'm Georgie, and actually having an analytics company, and I'm not really from the music industry, but I wanted to ask a question that we are doing recommendation engines for all kinds of music platforms, which is interesting. Some of our guys really can work with all kinds of files, like stem files from Beatport, and they're able now to use neural networks to actually replace some songs that are missing, and actually the results are very good. But I think what is really interesting is is it like a threat that computers take over art, or are you seeing any ways actually how to do it better, and are DJs using computers or things like that for the future? Which is actually giving you recommendations on how songs to be created, like Netflix does House of Cards based on I need Thriller with Kevin Spacey, and that's gonna be a big hit or something like that.
Hang on, explain the House of Cards thing again.
Yeah, so basically the Netflix data science team did a review on all the previous sort of patterns of viewing and everything around thousands of attributes. And they said that one big hit would be if we do political thriller with Kevin Spacey. So they started to think around ordering this type of thing. Of course, you cannot know whether it's going to be successful or not, but just a question.
Interesting.
And Google is trying to do artificial music too.
I think they want to know what the actual question is.
Are you seeing is an opportunity, actually not a threat? How do you use computers better for generating songs, things like that?
Okay. Do you like House of Cards?
I'm still kind of confused. How do we? Why do we do what?
Sorry?
So, repeat the question. I didn't.
Yeah. So, are you using, for example, any kind of predictions, like Spotify does for your best expected titles that you will listen to, or artists will never really look at what a computer tells them to try to go towards?
I mean, personally, I use whatever tools are available to me to find the music. Some of the stuff is stuff that I actually DJ with. Some of the stuff has I listen to country music at times. So it's every tool that's out there, whether it's radio, Spotify, SoundCloud, whatever tool is out there, I use it depending on the circumstances. So you talked about stems. That's another tool. Just makes you recreate. The music live, So any tool that's available to me as an artist, one, to get inspired, and two, to actually be able to perform better. I'm open to all sorts of. Personally, I'm open to all sorts of technology and all sorts of platforms, to make me better. To make me, reach out, or search for things that would otherwise wouldn't be exposed to. So, I'm a fan of all that stuff. And, I think everybody has a sort of individual preference on how things, how they do things. For me, it's like, it's fair game. Everything that's available, I give it a try.
Richie, how are analytics driving the day-to-day of Beatport as a business in terms of reviewing what's working for the company? I mean, there's on one aspect with actual music, but in terms of the business as a whole.
Yeah, I know we have an analytics team in Berlin that's under Terry, who's head of music. And, like on a weekly basis, Beatport sort of analysing, music sales by territory. We're starting to get a little bit of feedback from permitted artists from the live point of view on what territories artists are blowing up in, like new artists, and where the records are selling, especially with the streaming platform, which has gone up from 300,000 active users for the month of March when we did the soft launch at Miami to just under 2 million a month at the moment. So it is ramping up. And you can tell by the number of hearts on artists. Like 6 months ago, our artist had 2 hearts, and now like Armin's got 6,000 like hearted artists. So it's really starting to ramp up. So we're starting to see more traffic from the streaming point of view, from artists in what territories, what cities, and what countries. We're starting to see an increase in, so we use it to see what genres are becoming more popular, like the popularity of genres, which obviously then dictates to us how we serve the ads and the charts and that sort of thing. So Beatport has a lot of artist charts that are put together on a weekly basis, and if a specific genre is becoming incredibly popular and is growing, we'll serve more of those charts at the front at the time to sort of compensate, or not to compensate, but to what's the word? Not compensate, to stand side by side with the growth of the genre. So it's the genre's going popularity. What's popular this year isn't necessarily popular next year, but it goes in cycles. You see house music's come back and it has its downtime, and techno's sort of come back in a big way. I listen to some of the techno stuff these days, and to me it's house music, what it was like 20 years ago. We do a lot of data analysis, and we just actually hired 2 more staff in the last sort of 3 months. We're really not paying more attention, but investing more time in it. And also with the new platform, we're actually trying to build in more analytics for the labels and for DJs. So sort of middle of next year, there'll be a lot more analytics and data available to people that host their music on Beatport. So the feedback from the labels and the artists that we had is, they really like the SoundCloud dashboard and the analytics they can get from that. So we're looking to do the same and more. So it's becoming more and more a key, I guess, in an artist and label's way of marketing and moving forward, also for promoters.
Okay. We talked about House of Cards, which, for those who haven't seen it, is one of the best TV series ever made. But is SFX built on a House of Cards?
I was waiting for this question. Someone had to ask it. It's interesting. The story of SFX obviously is they went and bought a lot of companies that were making certain profits, and it was the theory of how it was sold to Wall Street was to basically that there will be benefits of centralising these businesses. But to be honest, the businesses all operate in a decentralised way. Like Australia operates as its own entity, pays its bills, sends money to New York, not as required, but as available. And it operates independently, basically. There are some synergistic benefits of being part of a company with some great partners in Amsterdam and in the States and in South America, etc. There are some DJs, for example, that the South American guys like Alok are sort of managing and developing that we're going to bring into Australia next year. So there are advantages to being sort of a global company, but at the same time, as soon as you become a publicly listed company, there's a lot of costs in being a publicly listed company. We as a company, before we sold, we had $120,000 a year in accounting fees, and now it's closer to $700,000 a year because we have the auditors come in from Ernst & Young every quarter, and it costs a lot of money to satisfy the requirements of the SEC to be a publicly listed company in America. So, it's been an interesting 2.5 years, and where is it headed? Obviously, the media out there. If you read some of the media, including Dancing Astronaut. We're closing shop on Monday. If you read Forbes magazine, we were supposed to be shut like a month ago. The finances are tight, but at the end of the day, the last 3 to 6 months, the business has been going well. There are certain initiatives as a collective, SFX was, as a global group, SFX was going to try and implement, and that was increasing brand partnerships on a global level to, obviously, from a sponsor's point of view, to bring more revenue into those events. That has happened to an extent, but not as greatly as forecasted. And there's also been a shift in numbers. I mean, anyone that knows the market globally, the big moment of dance music in the last 20 years was probably 2 or 3 years ago, where EDM was at its peak. And in North America and in Australia and various territories in Europe, it's flatlined. The growth has gone like this, and now it's kind of at the top. And in some territories like Australia, we've lost 4 or 5 national festivals in the last 4 years. We're in the cycle now where we're sort of heading down, and it's been coupled with what's been happening in Sydney with the lockout and things. So, but then you look at South America and the launch of Tomorrowland last year, which was incredibly successful, and South America is going great guns. So, because you're a global company and everything goes in waves, some territories pick up, some territories drop off, and overall, it's afloat, if that makes sense. So it's interesting times. There's a lot of interest from various companies to acquire certain assets of SFX, including Beatport, some of the creative agencies that we have, like Fame House and Media Agency and things like that. So it's just a matter of, what will happen, but we'll still be in business in the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years. There's a lot of interest that makes me feel comfortable that, whether it's Bob Silliman taking it private, whether we remain a publicly listed company, or whether somebody takes over the company in the next 6 to 12 or 18 months, something will happen in the next year.
Okay.
I think, if I may add something, I think it serves our industry if Beatport went private outside of SFX, because there's a lot of sort of moving parts from an outsider looking in, and should this sort of ship sink and Beatport goes down with it, our industry is going to be in trouble. Because right now, what other platform do we have as independent labels, as producers, to get our music heard? Back in the day, there were vinyl, obviously, and there were thousands of stores. Now there's only one. Yeah, there's other sort of smaller players in the industry, but we have one place, really. If you really think about it, 90% of the business of DJ music is going through Beatport. So, I think it's by situation, it's become the only place where a lot of music, a lot of DJs can find. I mean, I spend hours and hours on Beatport, just like I used to go to record stores and go through the bins. I spend hours and hours going on every single genre page, just looking for music, and I find amazing records that that sometimes don't even chart. Where else? How else are we going to replicate that? So while SFX and the powers that be are going to sort of sort out what they're sorting, I think it's important that special attention is given to the Beatport part of it. Make sure that doesn't go under should everything collapse. We don't want that one to go down. We don't want that situation. There was some rumor going on that some labels are not going to get paid. And I was like, wow, so many labels rely on that income to be able to release other records by other artists. It's a voice for. I mean, right now the record income for producers is just at the all-time low, with the streaming and all the stuff that's going on. So you take that away, how are DJs or up-and-coming DJs or future DJs and producers going to get their records heard? There's so that it's very important. I think we need to pay special attention to that and sort of take care of it. It's our little baby. It's the only one we have left, I think, in this digital age. And I think we need to sort of protect it.
I agree.
Is it on your conscience that you need to do the right thing to help secure Beatport out of something going wrong with SFX?
Yeah, definitely. Look, as I said, there are conversations going on. There's a lot of interest in Beatport from major record labels. There's interest in Beatport from seed funders that have been involved in Beats by Dre and various other, tech companies from San Francisco and et cetera. So I feel confident that, like I said, there's going to be some changes in the next 6 to 12 months, and that the events and festivals will continue, no problem. There'll be ownership changes, and I believe, Beatport will be one of them. So I think, I feel confident. Not that I am a label or an artist. I used to have a label, and I was never an artist in that sense, but just from what I know and the development roadmap of the streaming platform and the interest that we're getting on that from a lot of organisations is that that it will, it'll be okay.
Sharam, when I first met you in '95 or something, you were the first person I ever met that used to trade stocks and shares, and I was blown away by that. I was like, I didn't understand what it was at the time. What's your perspective? You must be monitoring what's going on there a little bit with that kind of knowledge and history about the share price of SFX, and have you been watching it?
Yeah, I've been watching. I mean, I think everybody in our industry has been watching what's going on there. And there have been some sort of shrewd moves made in order to, position the company to, benefit by this whole EDM boost, if you will. I call it dance music boost. And again, there's a lot of things that I don't think the public knows. There's a lot of sort of other motives. At least it seems like that way. And I think after a while, it sort of people caught onto it. As a business, I mean, I personally wouldn't invest in that stock right now because I can't tell, what the perspective is. I heard that James Barton is going to be taking over, so that's amazing news because I know now that whatever that's wrong with that ship is going to be righted. Because somebody who came from our industry, understands our industry, is going to be running it, and that's always a good sign. Instead of like somebody from the outside thinking, oh, we know how to do this, and come in and try to run something that they have no idea about. So I think that's great news. I'm very hopeful that if I were to I invest in people, so I think I would. Inside of me says go in right now because James is going to be there. But I mean, it's sort of like wait and see what happens. I hope everything works out.
I think there's a lot of people that would like that to be the case, but let's see what happens in the future. So next question, Paris, terrorism. First time ever that the music world and venues has been under attack from global terrorism. How does this industry, club owners, deal with a situation like that, and what should we be trying to do? There are people we know that are still in hospital as a result of that, who were just there running the club that night from new productions. This is now on our doorstep. It's a very real threat. We've got New Year's Eve coming up. There's these kind of moments now where I think we're all feeling a bit vulnerable. As a former, or still somebody involved in events historically, how do you view the situation?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's terrible what happened. I think it's the new age. I think it's, we have to be on alert that this could happen here tomorrow. And in saying that, I think, I know with the festival Stereosonic the last couple of weeks in Australia, there was a heightened thought process with the security of the event, with bag checking and with trucks coming in with deliveries and those sorts of things. And there was a lot more police sweeps overnight. In Sydney, there was a bust of two gentlemen that were drilling holes into a wall, apparently to hide their drugs, but you never know what they were drilling holes in the wall for. So I think, as like any event, whether you're in the sporting business of holding football or cricket or horse racing, or whether you're, even shopping malls, whether you're event promoters doing festivals, I think, it's a new economy. It's a new time now. We need to be on a higher alert and actually be thinking more and more that this could happen today or tomorrow. It's terrible that's this is the world that we now live in, but it's a real issue, and I think. There's obviously been a lot of commentary in America this week about certain things that have been said from certain future candidates for the Prime Minister of America, and please don't vote for Donald Trump, my God. But I think it's unfortunate that there's a very small minority, and it's the same with the drug issue. There's a very small minority that are going to spoil it for everybody, and I think it's really important that, the whole racism thing, that people just continue to respect one another, as you said, and not fall into the trap of like banishing Muslims and thinking that they're all the same, because it's just a very small, crazy minority in a very large community. And so it's tough. It's going to be a really tough time, and I hope, I hope the old, the Americans and the French and all this chill out and don't, go into a full-blown war and just aggravate the issue even more, because it is, it's going to continue. And I think, what happened in Paris, and there was also that one in Africa. Where was it? In South Africa, in one of those towns, like 20 people at a hotel, and it's going to. They're now linking what happened in America in LA, in San Bernardino, to the whole thing. I think it's going to be more and more, and we just have to be on alert and consciously think about it now.
Is there anything that's? I mean, there's nothing I think that is specific to our community that we can do. I mean, we're all exposed and we're all out there. Club owners, whatever you put on the front line of a venue, how do you protect yourself against a situation like that? You're kind of defenseless, right?
Look, I think so. We just have to hope that at some point, they work it out. They're extremists, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. But as I said, we can't put everybody in the same boat. It's a small minority in a large group, and if we were to be, to be racist about it and to say, oh, you Muslim, you can't come into the event. I mean, you can't do that, because it's kind of like the authorities tarnishing everyone that's into dance music is on drugs. It's the same kind of attitude, and it's not the case. It's a small minority. They're spoiling it for everybody. So we have to just kind of accept it and try and push that message and just be respectful of one another. It's unfortunate, that religion, that it's religious based at the end of the day, and it's one of the unfortunate things about religion is people don't see eye to eye and they share their differences in opinion, and they can't grasp that people can think different.
Sharam, as an artist looking at that footage of the band on stage, what did that make you feel as a performer and being in these exposed situations?
Well, I mean, it's something especially now that you're conscious of. As an artist, like I was doing a festival a couple of days ago at 808 Festival in Bangkok. I was, one of the first things I did, I was like, okay, where are the exits? So you're automatically thinking, if should God forbid something happen, what are you going to do? And then I was having an interesting conversation last night with Olga from IDNT. They run a lot of festivals, and I was like, well, how are you guys dealing with it? And and this was very interesting. Like it's like there's only so much organizers can do. I think at some point, perhaps the governments, city governments, should sort of foot the bill for security and whatever measures that could be taken. Same way that you do it in at the airports. I mean, you hate to be in a world right now that's like that, but I mean, you got to sort of like take some precautions. And then rely on the humanity to rise to the top. I mean, it's just some of the stuff is just like mind-boggling. Like what's going on with the world. You ask yourself like what's really happening. But like he said, you cannot let like a minority, like sort of the blip on the radar, like ruin the rest of the world. And I think people need to just have faith in humanity and at the same time, some precautions should be taken by organizers, and I think maybe there should be some sort of a coalition put together where the city is sort of involved with this stuff, just like they give the license to the the events. Maybe they should also provide extra measures of security. At the end of the day, it's protecting the citizens, and people want to have a good time. People want to go out and have a good time, and I think it's important that this whole process gets reviewed some way or shape or form. And to assure people that things are safer, and I don't think there's much else can be done. Again, like I said, we got to sort of rely on humanity to rise.
Media. We talked a lot this morning about what's been happening in Sydney with the Saving Sydney campaign. Richie, somebody said to me that after the incidents, the deaths that happened at Stereosonic, that you were the victim of a bit of a negative media campaign, even though you've exited the company. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I did an event. We had a really big problem with a drug called GHB in Australia from sort of 2007, 2008. And I was running an event out at a castle called Cryle Castle, and I'd ran events previously there for about 5 or 6 years, and then another promoter offered more money to the owner and took the venue from me for a couple of years. And then that promoter went bankrupt. And when I went back into the festival, into the site, it was a GHB fest. There was a lot of GHB issues, and the security had been loosened up, and the guy had hired less police and actually didn't pay the police from the previous show, so they didn't even turn up on the show before. And then I went there and did the first event there. I was like, holy crap, this is, this needs a big cleanup. So I went to the police and pleaded with them on the next show to kind of help out. And we had a lot of overdoses. We had no deaths, but we had a lot of overdoses. To put it into perspective, the 7 or 8 events I'd run before had about about 50,000 people. I had 1 ambulance. And then I do an event with 6,000 people and I had like 14 ambulances. It was a disaster from that point of view. And the local hospital had a lot of issues because all the life support systems that were there for people that coming in from a bus or a car accident or whatever else were full with ravers, So it didn't go down well in the papers, and the local hospital ran a campaign, a sensationalist campaign with the media, with the daily papers in Melbourne, and pretty much we got a hearing. We had to go to court to have a hearing, and the venue lost its permit, so no longer events to be run out there. So after the deaths of Stereosonic in Sydney and the gentleman in Adelaide, a promoter in Sydney at one of the most sensationalist papers that I never do interviews with because they're terrible. They're completely retarded to do interviews with because you say one thing and they turn into another, had basically dug up a whole lot of old press on the internet and looked at some comments where I'd been on In The Mix, on the forums on In The Mix as a promoter, pleading with the fans, saying, don't take this shit. It's putting major drain on my event and resources, and I'm having to have extra medical staff. It's drawing unnecessary and bad attention. It's going to close the event, and it's your event. So that small group of people, fucking pull your heads in and stop ruining our event for everybody else. For the other 99%, it's in your hands basically whether or not we're going to continue. It's your responsibility. And I'd also said on the forum that as a promoter, I'm not oblivious to the fact, and I'm not blind to the fact that there are drugs at the event. I know that there are. There is in clubs, there is in casinos, there is in entertainment in Australia in general, and people drink and people take drugs, and I'm a realist, and so what's the best way to deal with it as opposed to turn my back on it? And I actually made a comment and said that as a promoter, I preferred dealing with a crowd that was, for example, parts of the crowd were taking ecstasy or MDMA because it was a bit more relaxed. There was no fights, there was no violence, and we had no transports. And then this GHB comes on the market that sort of emanated from the gay clubs, and that was the drug that River Phoenix died on in LA. It was called Fantasy back then, and GBH, Grievous Bodily Harm. It's had all these different names. And as a promoter, I said I'd prefer to be dealing with a crowd dealing with this drug issue because it's a lot easier to deal with than GHB because the ambulances have put strains on the medical resources, and the journalist in Sydney after Stereosonic had turned that quote into I was telling the crowd they should take ecstasy and promoting the use of drugs and promoting they completely changed the context. So I copped a lot in the media, and then the journalist had sent me an interview demanding, he basically said, I seek answers by 6 p.m. Because the story's running tomorrow. And I got that email at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and didn't even see it until about 6:30. So it's just unfortunate that in Australia, what's going on with the lockout, there is an agenda in Australia to kind of close down as much of this stuff as possible. You've got a lot of journalists that are in their 40s and 50s that have absolutely no clue what's going on. The politicians are completely disconnected from youth and have no idea. We were telling them, like Australia has the highest ice epidemic per capita than anywhere in the world, and we were telling them about the ice epidemic, that it was coming because we could see it in the club scene, we could see it in the festivals, we could see it in general, that it was growing and it was dangerous because it was apparently 5 to 6 times more addictive than heroin, which is a very addictive drug. And we were ignored. We were completely ignored. We were telling the government State Department of Health, because I was on a panel that gave regular feedback to the government about recreational drugs, because obviously, I've worked with festivals for 27 years. We've had millions and millions and millions of kids come through our doors over the last 27 years. I think we have a fairly good idea on what's happening out there. and the politicians, in their 60s and 50s, they have no idea. So instead of using people like us as a medium, as some kind of feedback system to help them influence policy and give them real legitimate feedback on what's happening, because we were promoters, they ignored us for years going, oh, you guys are just, you do those drug parties, you're like drug promoters. So in essence, the government has dropped the ball. They've had no clue, and now in our country with alcohol and with drugs, we've got one of the worst, one of the worst countries in the world. And as Murat said, he's no longer proud to say he's from Sydney. I'm no longer proud to say I'm actually from Australia. There's a lot of things that have gone on, and I was proud of that. When I first met you, kangaroos, sunshine, Australia's great. Now, it's shit that we've got one of the worst drug problems per capita in the world, and it's not because I've been throwing great festivals and raves for 25 or 27 years. It's because police corruption. It's because the policies haven't been there, haven't been put in place. There's been no education. It's been a country of let's put our head in the sand and just ignore it. It'll go away. And every time something happens, we go, oh, that's bad, and it's all bad press. And then I bet in a month from now it'll all be forgotten. There'll be no more press about it, and all this talk about an inquiry and trying to change policy. And I've reached out to a few people in politics saying, if you can get me a meeting with the Prime Minister or the Minister for Health, I'll gladly go and have a chat. I'm sure no one will contact me. I'll get no feedback from the government, and the next minute they'll talk about it is when there's another death in 3-4 months' time. It's crazy.
Wow. Okay. Question from the floor. Yes. Go, Charles.
Charles Herbert from Pasha, Macau. How have you seen things change over the last 10 years in Asia and Australia? And have we had our heyday? Maybe worldwide, but over here as well.
Sharam?
That for me?
For both of you.
The dance music, I think everybody knows it. It's a global phenomenon now. And what's interesting is, as far as me being a DJ who plays the music, what works in America tends to work also in Europe and tends to work in Asia. Good music, I think, tends to work everywhere. And obviously people are more educated, and there's a lot more attention that's coming to the scene. A lot of people are graduating from sort of a lot of people that wouldn't know about dance music through EDM, they got exposed to it, and now they're sort of graduating to, more underground form of music. And I think that's a global thing. And I think, in Asia or anywhere else in the world, I think it's pretty much the same. I don't think it's really that much different, like how the crowds are in South America versus Asia. There's some little nuances that are different here and there, but for the most part, I think it's a global movement. And what determines the quality and how something can be better, I think it ultimately has to do with the organizers, with the club organizers, the bookers, festivals, and what they feed the people that come to these events. The quality could be controlled a bit more, and I think that will have a sort of positive impact overall, the way I look at it. But I think overall, it's just everything has become healthier in terms of attendance, in terms of exposure. I think it's we call it good times in the dance industry right now. We're at the sort of uptick about in terms of what's happened to dance music. Years ago when I started, we were we just hope one day, these radio stations, these record labels take us seriously. Well, now they've taken us seriously, and I think it's up to us to, show that we deserve that seriousness.
It's quite interesting from hearing people talk today. I think radio stations are taking us seriously now, but there's still a huge problem with print media, where national newspapers, broadsheet newspapers in England, in Australia, we were talking about controlling our own tone and our own media and propaganda. It's absolutely right, but we've still got the same fight that we had 20 years ago, which is that mainstream widely read national newspapers that politicians read still don't give this music any credence at all.
Yeah, like in Australia, there's 2 journalists that I'll only do interviews with. Any of the others I just ignore unless I've personally met them, and these are people I've known for 20 years, so I feel confident that when I do an interview with them, my side of the story is going to get across. But what I do now is, and I haven't had an interviewer specifically send me questions yet, I said from now on I'm only going to do interviews on email, and the questions that you ask me, I'm going to publish the question and the full answers on our website. So if you're going to try and turn the answers around and twist them into I said this, I said that, well, I'm going to post the actual responses on the internet so people can actually see the real responses. Because it's a shame you have to do that, but a lot of these daily papers, they're struggling, they're on their last legs because the internet is the online media is rising to the top, and they're desperate, and all they want is readers and eyeballs, and they'll sensationalise and turn an article into the most sensational thing. I don't read the papers anymore because it's about people getting shot, stabbed, terrorism, corrupt politicians, blah, blah, blah. And when you read it, you can't even actually believe half the stuff that's in it, because one person said they were in a car driving to Sydney, and that turned into they stopped at 5 service stations and shot 3 people and this and that, and they went via Perth, and it's actually, you know what I mean? You can't actually believe anything that you read in a lot of those press these days. So anyone out there, if you are going to do interviews with media, I would be incredibly careful. I'm not sure what they're like in Japan, in Asia compared to Australia and the UK, but I would do it on email, and I would publish your answers, the questions and answers in full on the internet, so you're getting represented properly.
Good idea.
Or tape it and keep the tape handy.
Should we get into that? Another question from the floor here.
So I wanted to see what both of your thoughts are on file formats and the evolution of that coming up. There's talk about stems, and there's even talk of producing dance music in surround sound formats, but also higher quality like FLAC, and there's this Pono player that a lot of bands and musicians have taken on. Just wanted to see what you guys thought on where that's going and the evolution of the file formats themselves.
I personally, try to get like the highest quality of the music that I'm playing. Like I tend to get like AIFF files or WAV files, and stems is another sort of platform of high quality that enables me to do different creative things. I know a lot of people that use like MP3, like low quality MP3, and a lot of times some clubs I can't tell the difference. Some clubs you can't tell the difference. It's just one of those things. I don't really pay too much attention to the format. I like to have everything at the highest quality. But some people who like starting out, maybe they can't afford to get the WAV files, or maybe they rip their music from YouTube. So, but they still, everybody has to start somewhere. I remember like when I was starting out, buying records, obviously like import records was a lot. So the store that I used to go to, they had these sort of the cassettes that they used to make mixtapes, and you listen to the cassettes, listen to all the music, and then pick what you wanted. And what I wanted to do at the time is, get one of those Walkmans that had like double cassettes, which was really rare, so I could go into the store and record the tape that I'm listening to, so I could have access to that music, because that's the only way I would be able to listen to that. Now, a lot of the kids, college kids, they don't have the funds, or especially places like, third world countries, they may not have the funds or the access so they find that, they rip their music off of YouTube, and that works for them. I think people need to just, people will find what they want, how they want it eventually, and some people care about quality more, especially if they can afford it, and they pay extra attention to that, and some people, it's all available. Everything is available, and I think it's up to the people to sort of choose what works for them.
Just a note on that, I know that I saw on the product roadmap that Beatport is introducing some new file formats, FLAC and I think another one. But I was just at the Sony offices in Japan a couple of months ago, and it was the first time I'd heard there's a format they use in Japan. It's called high definition, and it's 9600 kilohertz, like super, super high files. And one track, so the Daft Punk album was like $105 in high def, because each track is about $5 or $6 US per track. And so in the office, they put they had like a Sony sound system, and we sat there and I listened to Get Lucky and another track in this high def, which I guess is what you guys experience in your studios when you're making music. And it was incredible. I felt like the band was literally in the room. It was pretty insane. So I think that it's a format to kind of look out for. In Japan, I only know of it in Japan. If anyone here knows of it anywhere else, put your hand up. But I think it's only in Japan, and it was pretty amazing. I felt like I was in a studio with the band listening to music. Every little thing from a cymbal or a triangle, you could hear everything. It was incredible.
I think Dolby have just inserted Atmos into Ministry of Sound and a club in San Francisco, which is the first clubs that they're kitting out, which gives you this whole new surround sound experience. Pretty incredible. But okay, another question. Ryan Saltzman.
Hi guys, Ryan from Bullet. So there seems to be a growing trend globally for promoters to utilize brands and labels when hosting stages or events at nightclubs. I would love to know your thoughts on the benefits or negative aspects of this, and do you think it would be something that the Asian Pacific market could benefit from?
Okay. Yeah, like as a promoter, I used to bring brands to Australia, whether it was Cream or Creamfields. I guess the mentality from a promoter's point of view of that was it gave me... I knew James for many years when I used to work at Mushroom from 25 years ago, so we already had a relationship. But the idea of, doing a brand was like an instant, becoming part of an instant network with artists and with managers by an affiliation, like a partner. It's almost like a partnership. So... for us, we could have started our own brand, and we did with Stereosonic, and that was actually before we did Creamfields. But at the same time, it was an interesting alternative for us to work with a brand because, like I said, it gave us a direct connection to James and to some managers and agents that we hadn't worked with before. It had because it was an English brand and Australia's an English colony, it had some appeal from an audience. There's a lot of English backpackers and a lot of English people that live and travel and stay in Australia for a year at a time. So we kind of felt it was a good alternative. It was like a delivered sort of concept that was easy to kind of roll out. And it happens with a lot of the trance brands, whether it's Armin doing a State of Trance, and it's like a showcase. So I guess from a promoter's point of view, there are advantages. If you can do it yourself, I suggest doing it yourself. But if you're a promoter like us and you're like I was, and it was a business, we needed to do more than one thing a year to pay for our staff and keep our office staff kind of in work, throughout the year. So we would do various brands at different times of the year, and it was a nice delivered kind of functional solution.
Okay. Anything to add on that, Sharam?
I have a question. As a promoter, festivals and branding and all that, what do you think can be done to sort of cross-pollinate the festivals more, where it's not so segregated, where you have EDM tent, which basically occupies 80% of the festival, and then, other kinds of music. Usually there's a techno tent. So it's become sort of two polar opposites. You either got extreme commercial, you have extreme underground. There's sort of like no middle of the road anymore. What do you think can organizers like yourself, promoters, festivals, or even clubs do to address that?
I think from a festival's point of view, one thing that we've always tried to do with the main stage is use that as a vehicle to showcase. We talked about it with the Beatport chart before. The main stage shouldn't just be what's popular, because you'll end up having 5 spinning records in the top 10 and out of 10 of the DJs, etc. So, we use the main stage to showcase the leaders of different genres. So one year we had, you had Armin van Buuren, Paul van Dyk representing trance, and then you had Carl Cox representing techno. You had somebody else, doing dubstep or, doing dubstep or breaks or whatever. And we would utilise the main stage, and it causes an ebb and flow with the popularity. The stage is busy at 4 o'clock and it might drop off a little bit when Empire of the Sun came on because it was a band, it was Australian, and we felt that we had to support national heroes on the main stage locally as well as different genres. But I think the main stage should be used as a tool to showcase the top people in different genres as opposed to just having techno, trance, house, psytrance, etc. I think that's the vehicle. And also in the marketing and promotion, when we do promotion in the lead up to the festival, we're featuring mixes on the radio, like Triple J do a show, the national radio station Triple J do a show called Mix Up. I think they've changed the name now, but on Saturday nights, they would give us like 4 of the 8 Saturday nights, 2-hour blocks to put music on. So we would get, from our marketing department, we would reach out to all the agents and we would get a couple of techno mixes, a couple of house mixes, a couple of trance mixes, a couple of EDM mixes, and be promoting through the media the different genres and stuff as well, doing separate e-flyers for each stage, just trying to give fair representation to all genres as opposed to just, it's main stage is Tiesto, it's main stage is Tiesto, it's main stage is Tiesto. You know what I mean? I think that's the way to do it.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that across the board.
Well, EDC tried it in Vegas, didn't they? Carl Cox and Richie played on the main stage, but it's mixed results as to the value of doing it.
It's tough.
I mean, it's like you have to do it at some point. So it may not, And again, you got to understand, like we said, main stage, a lot of the people end up playing the same kind of records. And in the interesting thing is in sort of like underground, a lot of DJs play the same kind of records too, except with underground stuff, you don't know what's being played a lot of times. So if you really took notice of what actual tracks are being played or what sort of, they all sound similar too, but it's like less sort of recognizable. But it has to start somewhere. So if it was mixed results, for example, like you said, and I heard about that, I think I think that shouldn't discourage people. I think that's a first step.
It's a great thing.
The more and more it's done, the more people will get used to it, and the more it's. I think as DJs have. I always felt like DJs' job is to educate and entertain at the same time, and I think promoters have to do the same thing.
Well, it's actually more. I think in England now, for the first time, you're seeing DJs on the main stage of non-dance festivals, which is actually really interesting and really mixing it up. Calvin Harris headlined V Festival. With Bestival, we put Annie Mac on the main stage.
I love your festival. Your lineups are fantastic.
But we'd never had a DJ on the main stage ever until last year. Crazy when you think about it with our history and heritage. But it is the promoter that needs to think that way. I agree. But.
And I think people shouldn't be allergic to the fact that there aren't hands in the air the entire duration of the set. I mean, it's a journey, and you got to let the DJs, you got to allow them to do their thing, and not everything has to end up being like that. You know what I mean? So I think organizers can really dictate this point, and DJs obviously have to come to the battlefield equipped to deal with what's in front of them. You don't want to put people to sleep, obviously, but I mean, you got to entertain people. But I think in more diversification, I think overall, I think it's going to be really good for the sort of sustainability of our industry.
One of the hardest things as a promoter is being able to actually program your own festival. Even the billing, more and more agents and managers and acts are trying to tell us how to do our job, whether it's how we bill the artists on the lineup, whether it's the programming of the times. It's a tough job. I'm glad I don't do it anymore. After having a break, it's great.
So there's only a few of you.
But do you know what I mean? Like there's so many factors of being a promoter, and one of the factors that shitted me the most was dealing with agents, because they're trying to tell me. I've been doing festivals in Australia for 25 years, and they're trying to tell me how popular their act is and what time they should play and where they should be on the lineup and how good they're going to be for the festival. I'm like, this is my country. I know this market. I know the best time to put this act on. I know how many people are going to be there. I think I have a bit more of an idea than you in your little office in London telling me, what time the act should play. And that's been a real issue, I think, for promoters globally for so many years is having, booking agents program your festival.
Well, we could talk about this for another hour.
Yeah.
But Sharam, you had a great question for Richie. Richie, have you got one question you'd love to ask Sharam?
What time are you guys playing Deep Dish tomorrow? I'm really looking forward to that. I haven't seen you guys for like 10 years.
I think we're playing the closing set at one of the stages. We don't, obviously we started sort of putting some shows together.
And why did you? What got you out of retirement from going your own separate paths back together for
I think
Deep
it was
Dish?
like fan pressure more than anything else. I mean, it's like, every time, we go somewhere, people, the first question they ask is like, are you going to get back and do something together again? And I think, and also like, we accomplished a lot during the time that we were doing things together. And all the time, we were two individual people with very strong-minded sort of personalities, and we knew exactly what we wanted, how we wanted it. And people didn't know that there's actually two people here making up this brand. And after a while, we always planned it. I mean, we started planning the, sort of like stopping doing things together in late 90s. And it just took us like a few years to sort of transition to that. But we always wanted to be our own sort of individual producers and DJs, and we still are. And then after a while, once we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, it sort of became more appealing to get back. And it's like when we play together, it's fun. I mean, it's like you just like jam, like the old days, like so our managers and our agents, everybody's like, you guys got to program a set. You got to program a set. Everybody programmed a set, and we attempted to do that, and it didn't go anywhere because that's not where we come from. We were like organic DJs. So we just sort of jam, we sort of know what it doesn't always go right. There are times where like, are you really going to play that? But that's, I think, part of the charm of it,
The yin
I
and the
guess.
yang.
And it's sometimes like one guy goes too far in one direction, the other guy tries to compensate and goes way too far in the other direction. But at the end, I think people enjoy that. And I'm looking forward to okay, we haven't played in I think Asia together for like over 10 years. So this will be our sort of first event that we're doing together.
I think the last time you came to Australia was when you played in Asia, right?
I think that was the last tour, Australia, and then we had a couple of gigs in Asia. So
because for those in the audience, Deep Dish was like the Swedish House Mafia. You pulled the pin when you were up here.
Yeah.
Like you literally were at the top of your game, and then you both went and did your own thing. And it's a bit like the Swedes, how they sort of get out at the top because the only way from up there is kind of down. So it's kind of clever as well.
Correct. And then when we started coming back together, I think everybody expected us to like sort of come right back there, like with like a top 10 record right off the bat. And we sort of are like we've evolved as producers, as people, as DJs, and it's a more like an organic process. And if during this process shoot, sort of runaway record happen, great, but we're not really looking at it like that, and we're sort of like taking it sort of like more, again, like an organic approach, getting in the studio, like vibing and sort of finding our groove back, and
getting back to being creative, because when you're up here and you're on a major label, you're being pressured to produce a hit every time, I guess, because you're there.
Yeah, I mean, there's people's expectations are always there, and I think we the key is to stay true to yourself, and whatever happens, like if that happens to be, it's like my approach has always been, when I make music, is to stay true to yourself. Like if you end up making a record that gives you goosebumps, and that record happens to be a vocal record and has some like memorable synths, then so be it. Let that record do what it's supposed to do, and then if that record happens to be some underground record that everybody's dying for, then let that be, let that sort of have its own journey as well. And I think that's our way of sort of approach. Let the records sort of speak for themselves rather than trying to force it to be one thing because others are forcing you, to sort of make a specific kind of record, whether it's underground or overground. I never really understood that whole process of, is this underground or is this commercial? Like, it's music, just listen to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask you something else, but last question then. Tell us both about your fascination with Star Wars and who's going to get to watch it first, on what time zone?
Probably me. I'm going 12:01 p.m. next Wednesday, because it opens
in
on
Australia.
Thursday. 12:01 a.m. on Thursday in Australia, yep, next week. Then I've hired a private cinema with 31 friends. We have a cinema called Gold Class in Australia. It's like a business class cinema with reclining seats and everything, and we're all dressing up in our costumes. So that's on Thursday.
I want pictures.
And then I'm taking my son and 5 of his friends and a friend of mine to help supervise the kids, because when they have Coke and sugar, they go crazy, on Friday. And then I'm going to go on Sunday as well. My wife told me I have to take my daughter, so I'm going to go on Sunday as well. I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
Beat that.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people like you, right? And I'm excited as well. So let me ask you a question. What do you think is going to be the final tally of the first weekend of this movie? Give me a prediction.
I have no idea. I have no idea what movies do, but, like...
I think it could be the first movie that hits 1 billion worldwide opening weekend.
Wow.
It's very possible.
When are you going to watch it?
I mean, I haven't prepared like this guy. But, I'm going to, I heard there's 11 a.m. tickets are still available. So I might take that one, see it on Friday morning on opening day. Because I'm sure the midnight shows are gone. And
it opens on Thursday, just so you know. Thursday.
I know, but that's midnight. So I'm sure those are...
No, Wednesday midnight.
Wednesday?
Yeah, Thursday the 17th. Yeah. Okay. So Wednesday night, evening at 12:01, I'll be at the first screening, 3D, on my own, because I could only get a seat on the side in the middle.
I'll have to see it the opening weekend because, I think the internet is going to ruin it for everybody else. If you haven't seen it,
yeah,
the opinions are going to...
as quick as possible,
Okay, just to end this, Dom's asked me to ask you to tell the audience what your son's name is.
My son's name is Jedi, actually. Seriously. And contrary to what people think, it was my wife's decision to call him Jedi, not me. But what's really cool is when he gets his mail from school, because he's only 8 years old, it's Master Jedi Malay McNeill, which is really cool. Seriously.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, really, really fun conversation. Thank you for doing that. And we'll see you back here at 2:00 for a keynote with Armin van Buren. Thank you, guys.